So welcome everyone to Oskar and Katarina. And our question today is God's will or your will? Okay, so I'm Katarina Hanssens Carlsson. I'm an entrepreneurial blueprint consultant. If you want to create a startup, start with me in a one-day consultation. And Oskar, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Oskar Nygren. I'm an emotional fitness coach, and I basically help you remove your deepest traumas and find out the patterns in your life that are limiting you so you can thrive in your relationships, in your economics, and basically in your whole life. And you can reach me on realitydecoding.com.
Brilliant. Thank you, Oskar.
Thank you.
All right. So God's will or your will? Well, first of all, we're going to have to define who God is in the first place, or what God is. So, Oskar, what's God? Who's God?
Wow. That's a huge subject. Well, I would say that God is everything and God is nothing, no thing, right? And essentially for God, for me, is this overall stream of well-being that is moving humanity towards home, towards a completion of sorts, towards an ever-increasing stream of well-being. Yeah, that's where I would start so far. And whatever whatever relationship people have to God is what they need to have.
Absolutely. Everybody has a right to their truth. The church has a right to their truth. We have a right to our truth. Every truth needs to be respected. Where I draw the line is where we impose our truth on somebody else and torture them, imprison them, kill them because they don't agree with us. That's not okay. Okay, so Oskar, God is universal well-being. Is that correct for you?
Yeah, it's a stream of well-being, that anything that goes against and make you feel less than, or make you feel that, oh, this is going against me. But it's this it's essentially when you feel that you no longer are in that stream of well-being, that's when you're moving away from God. Now we're moving in a little bit into, let's say, some type of Christian teachings and so forth. But I don't think it's bad to choose any type of religion, because we always find something in them that are ringing true.
Yes, absolutely. And it's
which brings us into, the will and why God, and and should I do it without God or should I do it with God?
yes.
And why so?
Yes.
What is your question around that, or what is your answer around that, Katarina?
Absolutely. I'm going to define God first.
Oh, perfect. Do so.
Okay, so for me, God is universal intelligence. If you think of billions of universes, I mean, it takes absolute genius to create that. We can't even fathom with our minds, Does God have time to judge us? No. If God judges us, God judges himself, and God would never do that. So God is not a God of judgment. God is pure love. Einstein said, love is the greatest force in the universe. God is the greatest force in the universe, and God is love. So either you are pure joy, pure intelligence, pure love, or you're a God of judgment. For me, the God of judgment doesn't exist. I mean, there are gods of judgment, I'm sure. But for me, what we're talking about is the universal God is a God of pure love, pure genius, pure intelligence. And God is absolutely for you, never against you, for you. He, she, it is for itself and therefore for us. So a lot of what we've been taught about God and about hell and heaven is actually not correct. There is no hell. And we've been programmed, I would say, into believing that we should be in fear, we should be in poverty, we should be afraid of God. No, absolutely not. God is pure joy. And children are close to God. Why? Because they are pure joy. Okay, so God's will. Oscar, would you like to answer that, or shall I continue?
To God, about God's will. Well, the first thing that also comes to me in order for us to distinguish around this is the sense of understanding the meaning behind sin, right? Because there's something that's called the scale of consciousness, and it was developed by David R. Hawkins. And what he did was that he basically saw that when we're talking about shame, guilt, fear, and so forth, we're existing on a very, very low level where even our cells actually are getting damaged by that frequency in itself. It could prove that everything that exists, because he did a logarithmic scale, right? So shame was 20 on that, and universal enlightenment was 1,000, right? So everything that was below 200, which means that everything that was below the level of courage actually caused your cells to die. Everything above it made your cells actually rejuvenate and get healthy again. And so what is very interesting that when you move up to the scale, so above 500, then you're entering love, right? And love is just a little bit above reason, which means that you need to drop reason in order to enter love. And reason is always about right and wrong, what is true or false, and so forth. You need to enter a stream above that. So how does sin relate to this? Well, sin essentially is, the Greek word for sin means missing the target, right? And we have an idea, it's like, oh, you do that, you're sinning. But what does that mean? The target, well, the target in this case is God, right? So if you're moving up that scale and you're seeing shame, guilt, fear, and so forth, right? When you're being sin, when you're being lazy, when you're being slothy, or when you're being wrathful and so forth, you're essentially just missing the target, right? You're missing God. And that happens in the present moment, and you will feel it because you don't feel good when you are sinning. There's a sense of less well-being than if you are actually getting into that stream of well-being. So God's will for me is to move you away from that part where you're sinning. You become aware of where it is that you're somehow not tapping into that stream of well-being and moving further and further deeper into that well-being. God just wants you to become more whole, more complete, more prosperous, more loving, more kind, more wealthy, to essentially build, create the golden era on earth and make us just extraordinary happy human beings on this earth. That's my idea of God's will.
Beautiful.
What about you?
Well, do we actually know God's will? I think if we're very, very much in contact with God, we can have an idea. But I think God's will is so enormous. For me, it's joy, it's love, it's intelligence. I think it's about becoming one. I think it's about life itself. I think God wants us to live and express fully. Why? Because then God expresses and lives more fully. So, do we know exactly what his will is? I don't think so. However, God's will is absolute freedom. And so that takes us to our next question. What is our will? And is there a conflict between God's will and our will? And I say absolutely not. We can, as Oscar described, we can go against ourselves so that our vibration is so low that we're actually attacking our own selves. That should be a very good clue to what we're actually doing to ourselves, because scientifically it doesn't work to be negative. Scientifically it doesn't work, as Oscar was saying, to be in a polarity of good, bad, right, wrong. We've been in that polarity so long. Peace, war, no. Enough of polarities. Love is actually not a polarity. There is no such thing as the opposite of love. Some people say, well, there may be hate. We have created that polarity, but love in itself is a whole universe. Universes, it is God itself. So love and joy are not polarities. So is God's will in conflict with ours? No. So our next question is, what is your will? So, so first of all, the first question, Oscar, is our will in conflict with God's will?
Well, that is interesting, isn't it? It depends on whom you're asking, because it has everything to do with perception of who you are. Because if you regard yourself as, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, then obviously you become very aware that you are not in conflict with what God is desiring. However, if you are perceiving that there is no God and you are alone in this, then God also becomes more of a, it gets it stings you in the eye a little bit. Every time you hear that word, it's like, oh, there it is again. God, I'm so annoyed about this, right? And that is fascinating in itself. So it has to do with whom the person is that is really reflecting around that. But essentially it's like this, and this is the beauty of emotions, right? Because every time you go up and it's like, oh, God is coming in here, you have a filter. You have an emotion that is telling you how you are going to look at this. And if you're very aware of it, wait a minute, why is something coming up there and it's inhibiting my well-being in the present moment, right? It's not tomorrow, it's not yesterday, it's right now. And I'm angry at it. Okay, but do I benefit from that? No, I don't. Right? So it's very interesting when someone really taps in and say, like, what is happening right now and why? That's only when you can come to understand is like, well, whom is it that is actually judging my own perception of my will and God's will, right? That's where the juice is, because then we are able to actually, what do you call it? We're able to surrender more into that present moment. So I would say that from a very delusional point of view, yeah, absolutely, there is your will and there is God's will. But when you really drop into the field and you see, like, the reason why I do anything is just to feel good, and you know that God is ultimate well-being, then you know for a fact that you are on the same journey as God.
Absolutely. So In the end, we have absolute free will. So God gave us free will. So why would God then interfere with us and make our will wrong? So however we express is our will. The more we're aligned with God and with each other, the greater our lives are. And there's an interesting fact that even the word God, if you say the word God, your vibration increases. And in fact, you'll never, ever go back to the vibration you were before you said the word God. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that the Bible, even though it's been changed so many times, to put it mildly, it has the word God and it's survived and it's still a bestseller internationally because it has the word God in. So, to conclude, there is no conflict between God's will and your will. You are free, you are loved, and God, whether you recognize God or not, God loves you because you and God are aligned, whether you like it or not. So,
Yeah, and I want to add anything. The only conflict that is there because of what you make that conflict mean, right?
yes.
We have this idea that I mean I don't know why I get this idea of, think of a bank robber. So a bank robber, he wants well-being for himself. And he thinks it's prosperity, right? He wants that, and he concluded it's like, you know what? There's no right way of getting it. Doing the way the society is suggesting, it's hopeless, right? So he's operating from that place of lack, of hopelessness, and because of that, he then looks upon this idea of God and say, fuck it, I'm just going to go and rob a bank because that is my way of inducing well-being into my life. And that is based on a delusion.
Yes, it's an illusion, but he doesn't know it, and he doesn't see any other opportunities than that. That's the only way, and that's
Yeah.
who I am, and I am a bank robber, and that's what I'm going to do. And because he's chosen his identity, and then he
Yes.
has to keep that identity. Okay, so let's talk about next week. Thank you for watching, everybody. Next week we're going to...
Before that, can we give something? Can we give a practical, like let's give a practical exercise for someone. So, for instance, because we've been speaking a little bit about God's will and your will, now I want you as a listener to reflect a little bit about when you think of God and you see that think of God as he's directing your life, and see if you feel a little bit of like anger against that, or you feel happy against that, right? Just looking at, oh, you know what? He's moving you towards it and you don't have anything to say with it. Like, make it a little bit worse to sense that it was like, oh, I'm laying down my will for God, and see if you can sense whether or not there is a part of you that's like, I don't like this, and then look into that part and say like, ooh, what is it that I don't like, right? And just be with that part and be very kind to yourself, but just give yourself the permission to actually explore if there's something that is holding yourself against what ultimately is there for your well-being.
Very good. Thank you, Oscar.
Yes.
And the fact is, we've all turned our backs on God, except a very, very few of us. A tiny, tiny few people, a tiny percentage. And most of us are on our journey back home.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So next week, our question is poverty or prosperity? So thank you so much, Oscar. How do we get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can reach me on realitydecoding.com, where you can have a 30-minute conversation with me free of charge, where we find out where you are and where you want to be, so you thrive in life. You can also look at my other places, by the way, on YouTube, Oskar Nygren on YouTube, and then Live Your Purpose on Facebook. And Katarina, you?
Thank you. I'm Katarina Hanssens Carlsson, and on LinkedIn, I'm also my formal name, Catherine Carlsson. You can book a call with me. The best way is to connect with me and message me on LinkedIn. So we'll see you next week. Thank you for viewing and have a great week. God or no God?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.